At the end of this episode, Ashley and I are going to give you tips on how to implement the topics discussed today into your labor and birth. So I thought it'd be a good time to remind everybody that we are not your medical care providers and we are not giving you any medical advice within the podcast and its shows. You need to evaluate these 5 elements into your specific situation at your specific time of birth. If you have any friends that are also pregnant, please share this episode with them so they have more tools at their disposal. Here we go. Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started.
Hi everybody, it's Ashley and Care with you today, and I'm so excited that today we are going to be actually digging into the birth world and talking about one of our favorite subjects. And this episode is for families and doulas. This is something that if you're going to be having a baby, supporting someone having a baby, these are the basis for creating a really positive, impactful birth environment to help everybody have a positive experience. And we're going to be talking about the 5 universal elements of birth.
And this episode can definitely be shared with grandmas, aunts, whoever's going to be there, whoever you're inviting to your birth. And Ashley and I are both struggling with allergies today, one in Oregon and one in California. I don't know what the deal is, but I'm hacking, she's hacking, her eyes are watering, my eyes are watering. It's going to look great on Spotify and YouTube for everybody. So
yeah, this is going to be the cutest episode yet.
Yeah, we're hot. We're hot today. So I'm going to go back to when I first became a doula. I hadn't really heard about the 5 elements of birth, but I came across, it was probably a year into being a doula. I was reading everything I could. I'm a researcher. I was drinking all the juice, right? Whatever there is, I'm going to learn about vaginas, vulvas, and all things physiological birth. I came across several books by Michel Odent. Michel Odent is the leading French obstetrician, dare I say the leading obstetrician in the world, who supports physiological birth, who has been a great scientist and observer, as well as researcher to the hormones and how we have given birth since the beginning of time and how it has changed over time. His works are magical. He's in his 90s now, not practicing anymore, but there are countless books that I encourage all doulas to read, parents to read. One of my favorites was Childbirth in the Age of Plastics. And I just the title, I was like, what is that about? And how it has shifted the way we interfere and take over births and run things, because before we had IVs and all those kinds of things, it was different. And it's just been fantastic to listen to what he's had to say and what he's observed attending water births and all kinds of births for as long as he's been an obstetrician. So one of his articles that I read had the 5 elements of birth in it. That became, after I started practicing it in my doula work, it was working so well, it became something that I brought into my hypnobirthing classes. The 5 elements of birth are basically how to support a mammal in whatever environment they're in, and it is universal. If you can cultivate these 5 things, things shift in the birth room. So when you're a brand new doula and you don't know this person very well, if you're coming in as a volunteer and you do not know them at all, if you can practice these things, it shifts the birth environment because you're holistically supporting the birthing person in a way that is natural to us in being supported. So the 5 elements are silence, safety, privacy, warmth, and darkness. And we'll put those up on the screen for you so that you can see them. For those of you that are watching, when you cultivate those, and I also want to say this too, as mammals, we are the only mammal on the planet that when a person goes into labor, we move them from their natural environment, their natural habitat, right? A tiger doesn't go into labor and then all the tigers say, okay, time to move into the city to have a baby. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. And we didn't always do that, but now we do that. So cultivating these 5 elements in whatever environment they're in, whether it's the car on the way to that birth environment or at the hospital, whether they're medicated, not medicated, they still apply because we are trying to silence the neocortex. So we want the birthing person to be working out of the monkey brain, the hind brain, the instinctual brain, which is in the back of the head. The front brain is what keeps everything alert, and it keeps you in fight or flight, keeps you in awareness, and doesn't allow those hormones to infiltrate into taking you to another place where the hormones can freely go through your blood-brain barrier and dampen the pain receptors and all of that kind of stuff because you're in thinking mode. So these really support getting out of that neocortex and encouraging an environment of safety and moving forward in labor. Because if you want to put the stops on labor really fast, ignore all of these.
Well, and I like that you pointed out, medicated or unmedicated. What I share with families when we teach these classes and in our meetings together, my doula clients, is that these apply for whatever type of birth you're having, whether you're having a baby out of your vagina, you're having a scheduled C-section, you're having a medicated birth, unmedicated birth, home birth, hospital birth. In order for this to be the beautiful, positive, meeting your baby for the first time, in that instinctual, the calmest, most joyful place we can be, we need to treat it like the mammalian physiological experience that it is, even if the baby's coming out of the sunroof instead of the front door, because we want you to be in that place of safety. We want it to be quiet. We want all of these things to be implemented so that you and your baby have the best possible start. And especially if you're just now kind of getting into the birth world, it sounds a little woo-woo to say birth like a mammal. But we have to remember that, like, we are animals, we are mammals, just like all other mammals in the world. And even though we do have these higher functions, at the end of the day, when it comes to physiological birth and our hormones and the chemicals in our body, we're mammals. We're just the only mammals that can worry about how it's going to work. Can I do it without an epidural? Where am I going to do this? My house, the hospital, how am I going to get to blah, 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 blah. All the things that go through our head that then take us out of that, what our body physiologically needs. And if you think about those 5 elements of birth, silence, safety, privacy, warmth, and darkness, there are other times in our lives where we have those things implemented. And one of them is sex for most people. Right?
I don't know about
unless
the privacy.
You're a voyeur.
Yeah, there's some of us that don't really care about the privacy thing.
Yeah, the privacy thing maybe some people don't care about. But for the most part, for most people to be intimate with a partner, they need it to be quiet. They need it to be, warm. They need privacy, all of those things. And the other one is sleep, right? When we think about when most labors start, when I'm working with a doula family and they say, okay, but what about traffic? And I say, it's not going to matter because your labor is going to start in the middle of the night, because most of us need these 5 elements to feel safe going to bed at night. When we have those 5 elements locked and loaded and we're safe enough to crawl into bed, the baby's going to be like, oh, hey, things are pretty good out there. I think now's a good time. And as nice as it would be to have a working hours birth and get a good night's sleep, most of the time babies are waiting for those signals from our body that it's all good. And if you think about it, that goes back to the previous iterations of ourselves and other mammals. When a mammal feels safe enough to sleep, it means there's no predators outside the cave, right? So when the 5 elements are honed in for mammals, they can rest. And when they're honed in for mammals, they can birth. And we are exactly the same. Do we birth in caves? Are there lions and tigers and bears? Not in the literal sense, but as you'll hear Karen and I talk about often, we all have our tigers that we face when we go into labor. But it starts with trying to implement these things so that we are in our safest, calmest, most positive state to begin the process of welcoming our baby, whatever that looks like and wherever it is.
Well, and our hormones govern our labor, right? So also our circadian rhythms govern our labor. Melatonin plays a big role in jumpstarting our labor. And one of the reasons that we encourage our families, get as much rest and sleep as possible the last part of your pregnancy, because your receptors are waiting for those melatonin things to hit them. The more you sleep and the more you rest, the better your body is going to be equipped when everything tips off. One of the things that we need to remember is that birth is an automated process. If you are in a coma, your body will go into labor when it's time. Your body is going to move forward. You can't just not have a baby, right? Oh yeah, I just refuse. I think this was a bad idea. I'm not doing it. It's not going to happen that way, right? It's one of those things like Ashley has said, you either surrender or be dragged. Your body is going to do it whether you want to or not. If you can get out of the way and work with your body instead of be that stop, start, putting your foot on the gas, putting your foot on the brake, it's going to go much easier and it's going to be a more positive experience because you're not afraid of what is going to be happening. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not.
Exactly. Well, I think this would be a good place to start with talking about the 5 elements individually. And I think what's really important to remember going into this topic, it is really simple and we're sort of, saying these 5 things. There's not one right way to implement these, and the idea is to take these 5 elements and make them fit what works for you or the person you're supporting. It's to individualize these. So as we talk about them, we're going to be going through sort of what this might look like in a birthing space, and then at the end of the episode, we're going to give you some really practical ways to implement them or things to think about as you're preparing for your birth to figure out how you're going to use these to cultivate the right birth environment for you. So we always start with silence. And the word silence, I think for some people, they hear that and they're like, why would I want things silent? Why? Wait, that doesn't sound right. I'm a human being. Silence is not part of my...
And everyone told me to create a playlist, and I've got a rockin' bangin' playlist. I'm bringing it.
Exactly. And so what silence really means is that obviously for mammals out in the wild, they're looking for it to be quiet so they could hear threats if they were near, right? But for us, silence means that we are birthing in a space, in a room, wherever we're laboring, that is filled with sounds that we want to hear, that make us feel good, that are positive for us. And so for some people, that is a quiet room. And so if you're in the hospital, oftentimes they'll have the babies on the monitors and they'll have that turned up really, really loud. So it's like boom, 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 boom. And that can be really stressful. Some people like to hear the baby's heartbeat, and so for them, it's very comforting. Music, as Care mentioned, the playlist, music is one of those beautiful, uniquely human comfort measures that I encourage most families to utilize, but it's not for everybody. Not everybody loves music that way. But for most people, creating a playlist of music that brings them joy is the right way to create an environment of sound that's going to make them feel really safe, that's going to create that quote-unquote silence that is good for their brain. People ask me all the time, like, what should I listen to? I'm like, should I get like a yoga list? Well, what brings you joy? What makes you feel good? If it's Janet Jackson, if it's Disney music, if it's gospel music, whatever it is, that's what should be on your playlist because it needs to be sounds that stimulate your brain in a joyful way that release those endorphins that support those hormones. And that's different for every single person. I literally had a birth where we listened to Hare Krishna chanting the entire time that they were in labor. And that's what was the right thing for them. And then I had one birth where we listened to the Greatest Showman soundtrack on repeat the entire time.
Okay, that I would opt for that. That is my favorite soundtrack. And I once had a birth that was 32 hours of Disney music. And I was going to jump off a cliff. I can't even hear Kiss the Girl now without getting nauseous. It ruined Little Mermaid for me. But it was, they are the Disney family, right? And if they're listening to this, they know because I was like, dude, I was really going to jump off a cliff. I couldn't handle it. But it was what brought them joy, right? That baby went home in Mickey Mouse ears from the hospital. So you know that's what brought them together. That's where they got engaged, all the things.
It made them feel safe, right? And that's really what it comes back to, right? Is especially music that evokes positive feelings and positive memories for us. It makes us feel safe. It's also predictable when it's music that you're very familiar with. It is the words that you know, the rhythm that you know, and that predictability also lends itself to that feeling very safe with those sounds, especially when we're in a hospital and things are very unfamiliar and there's a lot of unfamiliar sounds. That familiarity is really positive. The other way that we think about silence is the chatter or talking in the room. So it's, how the nurses and doctors, the midwives communicate with us. It's about how the people in our support team are talking to each other or not talking to each other. And again, this is a very individual thing, right? Some people like absolute silence other than their music or whatever it is when they're having surges or contractions. And, Kara and I share a mutual client who wanted idle chatter the entire time. She wanted her entire team, her midwife, her partner, the midwife's assistants, all talking about everything and nothing the entire time, because she knew if they're talking about BS, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. When the chatter stops, then I'm concerned. So she's like, keep talking about nonsense, because that's what I need to hear. Now, some moms, if the doula and the partner are talking about the football game that just happened, they're going to be like, that's enough, no more. So again, it's a very individual decision about what sounds are going to feel right to you when you're in the birth room. So again, it's not about silence necessarily. It's about silencing the things that are taking away from our birth and amplifying the things that are going to contribute or add to it, whether that is quiet, whether that's music, whether that's conversation. It's very individual, but when we start thinking about it, we are starting that process of cultivating that positive birth environment for ourselves.
Well, and one of the things that we also need to remember is that when you are in labor, things are very amplified. So as a mammal, back in ancient protection mode, right, we need to be laser sharp in our hearing because we're looking for predators, right, with our ears. That's one of our senses that even if our eyes are closed, I can hear a stick crack and I'm thinking there's a tiger, right? So I remember in labor, even a whisper that was, what, da, 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 I heard as like a bullhorn in my face, and I was like, shut up! And it was literally a whisper across water running, and I heard it as a bullhorn. So understanding that it's going to be amplified for the birthing person may want to dial back your normal tone into something very soft. And I have also found that if I am mimicking a very soft, quiet sound in the room when the nurse comes in and the doctor comes in, and I'm only talking to mom and dad in that kind of a voice, everybody else will start to follow that lead. So it's a really good way, because if they come in very, hey, what's going on? And we're all talking in hushed tones, that sets the tone for everybody else. So if that's what's working for the birthing person, you as the support team can mimic that to get everybody else on board. The next piece is safety. And when we're talking about safety, the need to protect the birthing person in any form that means, I'm not saying you got to be packing a gun when you walk to a new environment, but you need to protect their environment. So what makes them feel safe? Sometimes it is just us. I just want my partner and nobody else. Sometimes it's just the doula and the partner and nobody else. And then I've been to that big fat Greek wedding that was actually a big fat Greek birth. And there were 27 family members in that birthing room with their cameras out videotaping the entire vagina warfare. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to go on the internet with all. I was freaked out, and that mom was in her element. Everyone was laughing and talking and giggling and making jokes and yelling at each other. And it was literally what you saw on screen playing out in real time. The midwife and I were literally out of the room at this point because there was no room for us. And she
that
felt
had to be pre-COVID.
It was very pre-COVID, like years ago. And she felt safe and comfortable and confident. And I mean, her dad literally had his camera in her face looking down at her vagina. Her dad. That would have mortified me. She was in her space and she was birthing well. The midwife would come in, check, everything was good, back up. Family would rush in. We have to understand that it is going to be different for every single person. If a mother-in-law triggers every cell in your body to be like, oh, hell no, that mother-in-law does not come in, right?
Or your own mom.
Absolutely, right? My mom was not invited to my birth for that reason.
I never want to just disparage mother-in-laws. It could be your own mom that is the oh, hell no.
Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes it can be your partner. Like, we don't know what it's going to be for that person, and it can also change. So understanding that birth is not a spectator sport, and just because everyone in your family wants to be there doesn't mean they are obligated or have the right to be there. If it doesn't work for you, then you're going to say no, because you can lengthen your labor by hours with not feeling safe. And it's very important that you know what that safety means for you, because sometimes I have to stay home as long as possible because this is where I need to pee in my own toilet. I want my apples and peanut butter. I want my dog with me. But then at the same time, you have to plan for what if my water breaks and I'm going to be in the hospital earlier or at the birth center earlier and I won't be able to be in the safety of my own home. What does that look like, right? You need to plan for everything when it comes to any of these 5 elements and have those conversations with everybody that's on your team.
I think a really important piece when we talk about safety is the venue that we choose to birth in. And as you'll hear Karen and I say a million times, 99% of our families give birth in the hospital. And that's absolutely their choice. Like for most people, that's where they feel safest giving birth. But what I tell all families is when you think about going to your hospital and you feel that little itch in your brain, maybe a little chill up your spine, because our entire lives, we are programmed to view hospitals as the place where bad things happen, right? When do you go to the hospital for something good? Ever. You don't. You literally go there because you're sick or someone you love is sick or you're injured, someone you love is injured or some kind of surgery or something like that. And now somehow we have to flip this switch and say, I'm going here for the best day of my life. This is so great. I feel so good about this. And so I think it's really important for people to know that if they feel strongly that they should birth in the hospital, but they still feel that little conflict of like, ugh, I don't love hospitals. Nobody loves hospitals. And that's okay. Just because you feel that kind of does not mean that that's not the safest place for you. On the other hand, I have families, and I've had families switch venues from the hospital because they couldn't get past that feeling, because they had medical trauma, because they had bad hospital experiences previously, whatever it is. I had one mom during COVID who was like, I cannot walk into a hospital right now. I don't want to get sick. I don't want my baby to get sick. I don't want to be separated from my baby or my partner. And those fears were valid and strong. And she was like, I never thought I would say this, but I think I need to give birth in a birth center. And we made it happen. If you can't find a way to get comfortable enough to walk through the doors of your hospital, maybe you need to consider birthing somewhere else. And it also works the same way. I have had moms that say, you know, I think I need to have a home birth. I think I need to have a birth center birth. I had one mom who was, Karen knows this family too. We have so many mutual clients, that was born at home. So she felt like I should have an out-of-hospital birth. I should be able to do it. My mom did it. I should be able to do it. So she was essentially doing it for her mom. She was also a nurse. And we labored for so long at home, waiting for this birth to take off, waiting for things to kick in. And they just stayed and stayed and stayed. And as soon as she said to the midwife, I want to go to the hospital, her water broke and her labor kicked off, because she spoke in her truth of where she actually would feel the safest, which was the hospital. So we really want you to think about and consider the venue that you feel like is going to support you feeling the safest birthing your baby. And no two people are going to have the exact same feelings about home birth, birth center, hospital. And we'll have future episodes where we really dig into the differences between those birth environments, but just thinking about, okay, where am I going to feel the safest? And for most people, the compromise is staying home as long as possible and then going to the hospital as late as they can. But you got to find a way to move past that feeling when you think about the hospital. And Kara's advice, the first time I took her hypnobirthing class, she said, maybe you need to have a picnic lunch every day in front of Scripps La Jolla. And I was like, yes. Like, get familiar, get comfortable, because you need to be able to walk in there feeling safe. It's so, so important. And remembering that that feeling of safety is unique to you as an individual, that there is no one right way to feel safe giving birth. And what makes you feel safe is so important to your birth experience. So we always want you to be thinking about that.
And I'm glad that you brought up not birthing in a place that everybody else wants you to birth at, because we've always had students that have said, well, everybody says this, I don't feel safe there, but to keep everybody happy so no one's fighting. And I'm like, this is not the time to be the peacemaker, my friend, because you're the one that has to suffer the consequences. If you do not feel safe, find your voice and make yourself safe. pre-labor if possible. Because if you've already set those boundaries, it's just going to move forward at a different rate. We don't want hours added to your labor because of the stop-start because you don't feel safe. And as a mammal, your body is going to do that to protect yourself.
Exactly. And, you know, we can really dig into this particular topic because it even comes down to, you know, I'm choosing induction because it makes me feel safe. I'm choosing an epidural because it makes me feel safe. I want to be continuously monitored because it makes me feel safe. When we talk about the practicalities at the end and kind of ideas about implementing this, we'll talk about making sure that the type of touch you receive makes you feel safe and all of that stuff. Safety is critical. And it goes back to what I was saying about the predator outside the cave, right? It's just that what we're facing is a medical giant in terms of how most of us are giving birth, as well as family history and all of these things that kind of pile on us that can take away from that feeling of safety. So we want to get you thinking about it. We want to get you starting to make a list and processing and thinking about what are the things that are going to make you feel safe. What Care was talking about in terms of who's there, who's allowed in the room and all that stuff really ties into the next element of birth as well as safety. All of these really kind of mesh together to create this environment, and that's privacy. And privacy means, as Care so eloquently said, not everybody is invited to your birth. Birth is not a spectator sport. It's the biggest reason why most people do so well laboring at home before they go to the hospital, why things progress at home and then slow down when we change venues, when we, you know, take the tiger out of the jungle and put it in the city, as Kip said, is because we are losing that element of privacy, or we can lose that element of privacy. There are definitely ways to cultivate privacy. Privacy is a unique feeling to each individual person. Maybe privacy for you is it's me and my partner unless a medical provider needs to be in the room. Maybe for you it's my partner, my mom, my sister. Maybe it's we are hiring a doula. And for some people, when we talk about privacy and we talk about hiring a doula, people can feel like there's conflict there between those two things. So I think it was actually author Emily Oster who said in an Instagram post that people question her desire to have a doula at their birth in terms of why would you hire a stranger to come to your birth? And then at the end of the day, when she had her baby, the doula was the only person in the room that they actually knew because all the nurses and doctors and hospital people were strangers. So even though they hired her, she was someone who was there to support them, that knew them, and that was still helping cultivate that environment of privacy because she had this person who was on her team. You are going to think about who is going to spectate my birth, right? Who's going to be involved? I've even had families where there's no text that goes out to any family members until the baby's crowning, or sometimes after. It'll be, surprise, we had a baby, because they know that those boundaries are not strong enough to support privacy, that there's going to be text messages and phone calls. And, you know, we even have family members trying to call the hospital to say, are they there? Like, families get crazy, and we're not all the best at setting those boundaries. And so how you implement privacy into your birth environment is going to be a really important conversation to have with your partner, and really thinking about, what does privacy mean to me? What does privacy mean to my baby? And how are we going to create this as private, intimate moment as we possibly can for our birth experience?
I love that you brought up the fact that sometimes we have some conflict in our family with we're hiring a doula and they're a stranger, and maybe mom, grandma, mother-in-law, whoever is like, I can't believe you're going to have that chick and not me at your birth. That's a stranger. However, there is a difference in me being a doula, walking into the room and supporting you when I have zero filters of how you normally act, right? And when I'm a mother-in-law or your sister or your mom, and I see this weird look on your face, as a mom, mother-in-law, sister, I'm going to be like, oh, there she goes again, right? That's what you're interpreting. As a doula, I'm like, what can I help you with? It's so different to have a birth professional that is a quote unquote stranger, but who actually knows what you need and stuff like that in the moment, because I don't have any filters for you. I am there supporting you with whatever you need. I'm there for, and I don't have any history of how rude you've treated me in the past with that exact same look, right? There is a huge difference in that. And as much as I don't want family members to be offended, that's the reason. And it has nothing, it's not even personal. It's in this moment, I need to feel as safe and private and warm and whatever as I can in order to birth well. And it's hard because my mom was very upset when I didn't. She's like, you're my baby. I have to be there. Well, you also said I was going to die if I did a natural birth. So you're not going to witness my death.
Well, and it's part of why it's really important that your family, if they are invited into the space, that they're familiar with the birth education that you took, that they're familiar with your doula, that they're familiar with these 5 elements so that they are doing their very best to support the environment that you need to have your baby. But if they can't set their shit aside, they can't be in the room. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not their baby and it's not their birth.
Boundaries, work on them ahead of time.
We can't say it enough.
It's key. The hardest part of advocating sometimes is with your family and friends, way more than hospital staff. And
100%.
As a parent, you're going to need to have those skills or you're going to be walked on all the time and wonder why nothing changes. I'm always a victim. Yeah, well, that starts with you. And can't stress that enough. Okay, so we're going to move into the next one, which is warmth. And that sounds so trivial. Warm, we'll just give her a blanket. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Sometimes in labor, you're super hot and a blanket's going to make you sweaty. So that's not actually the thing. Your temperature is fluctuating all the time. Warmth has much more to do with support and why it's going to be private. It's going to be safety. It kind of all mixes in with that. Somehow this has made a mark in my brain, and I'm going to go back to this. When we feel safe enough to orgasm and be as loud and whatever as possible, if we go all the way back to the beginning of time, okay? So we needed to be protected if we were the weaker species or whatever. We are going to feel safe enough to orgasm if the man, the protector, kept a fire by our feet. We were safe because there was fire, right? I know that I can release myself into this person. We orgasm better when our feet are warm. So I want you to think of a nice, pretty teddy with fuzzy socks. There is something innate about feeling warm because our environment is such that it can structure safety in warmth, right? Are we going to birth really well if we're in freezing, rigid temperatures? No, because our outside is going to be thinking about, I have to stay warm, I have to stay warm. We're about to birth a human being. So our instincts are, I have to keep this baby warm in fur, right? Once again, going back to the eons of the beginning of time. Those things are in our gene pool. So making sure that the support around this birthing person is warm. It can fluctuate, right? Now she's going to be cool. The way to keep a mom cool is her neck and her wrist temperature. Those cool cloths work amazing during labor to kind of regulate temperature because you wet them once and you throw them around their wrist. If you don't have one of those, you're going to be, wetting cold washcloths maybe in the birth room with a bucket of ice and asking permission before you touch her with those cold washcloths. But regulating her temperature becomes more of a support thing. Warmth can also be touch. Does she want to feel warm, solid touch on her arms, or are your hands too hot? Then she does not, right? It's a matter of more than regulating temperature. What is the comfort level in the room and in her body? Because those hospital rooms are kept at a 30 below zero for a reason, right? If they were super hot and warm all the time, we would have bacteria and mold and all sorts of germs just growing like crazy. So we keep it cold on purpose. But that might not be working for her at the time. So fluctuating that heat and keeping her regulated is another way of protecting that environment for her.
Well, and if you think about it, it's another one where the 5 elements inform each other because warmth informs safety. And when we're giving birth, instinctually, we know, just like dogs and cats and deer, that when our baby comes out, they need to be warm. And if we're in a frigid, cold environment, does that feel like a safe place to have our baby? Is that going to keep our baby warm when they come out? Everything in our body is saying, I want my baby skin to skin when they come out so that I can help my baby regulate their body temperature. I need to keep my baby warm. If I am not warm, I cannot do that. And even if you're not consciously thinking about that, instinctively, you know that. And it's amazing what we do instinctually when we're handed our baby, how we're just sort of like, bringing them into ourselves, and we find ourselves rubbing them and doing everything we can to keep them warm. And so it informs that feeling of safety when I know that this environment, the feeling of this environment is going to be good for me and good for my baby.
You're cutting down on hemorrhage too after a mom has had a baby. If you're keeping her warm, throwing a warm blanket on her, right? Go back to throwing warm furs around the mom and the infant. It is a safety thing for her body to go, I'm okay. I can shut things down now in a very safe way because she's warm. Warmth is a big deal when it comes to physiological birth. And when we're birthing in a hospital, the staff is thinking about themselves too. They're hot. They don't want that room baking hot. But even the World Health Organization says you want to cut down on those negative impacts on labor. You're going to bring that temperature up for the room. And I'm sorry if you're sweating in your scrubs. Right now, we're thinking about mom and baby. It's a necessity to birth well.
Exactly. Well, this really leads us into the last and probably our favorite of these 5 elements, and that's darkness. And we've kind of been hinting at this all along because darkness ultimately creates what we need for most of these. And really, for most of us to go to sleep at night, we need it to be dark, right? When we talk about darkness, again, we're talking about a level of light or lack of light that is right for each individual person. But if we're trying to trigger that melatonin and those endorphins that come when it's safe for us to go to sleep, then we are looking for darkness. Again, why most labors start at night, and also how we can try to recreate that darkness and keep that birth feeling like nighttime even when it's not nighttime, to help make sure that we are supporting that environment that our bodies and our brains are looking for birthing. So Karen, I know this, right? Like there's the right amount of darkness for each individual person. And sometimes we do need to let some light in to reignite some energy, to remind them like, hey, it's not an endless night, an endless labor. The sun has come up. It is a new day. But for most people, as we already said, labors start at night. And for most people, labors progress in the nighttime and slow in the daytime. And that is because of our circadian rhythms, because of our use of melatonin, that we will see this. People who have sort of stop and start labors, things kick up at night, slow during the day. Kick up at night, slow during the day. Because darkness really does something to our brain that makes it feel like now's a safe time to birth. No one can see me. Again, lending itself to privacy, that I'm free to move as I need to and do what I need to do because it's dark, right? And so, again, it's individual. You're going to customize this to what feels right to you, but we'll sort of talk about different ways to create the darkness that your mind and body need to birth a baby.
The other thing I would like you to research those fluorescent lights that we have in the hospitals, because it has been proven time and time again that they can shut things down and slow our hormone production and interfere with the melatonin and the circadian rhythm that is governing our labor. I won't even walk into a hospital without my mom's eyes being closed. Either she's got sunglasses on or 40 blinks or something like that, because she's going to birth well and keep the hormones flowing better if she is blocking those fluorescent lights. 40 blinks are the eye mask that we encourage all of our families to use during labor, because I have watched it shave hours off their labor. They are so inward when they can't see anything, and it works well to protect the environment as you're walking into the stadium lights that are the hospital walls.
A lot of people will ask me, why in the world would I wear an eye mask when I'm giving birth? What in the 50 shades of birth is this? I will look crazy. People will look at me crazy. It's like I won't know what's going on. And as I tell our families all the time, guess what? When you have that on, what's happening outside of it is none of your business. So it doesn't matter if the security guard's looking at you crazy. It doesn't matter about the nurse looking at her watch and being impatient. Nothing matters. I get a lot of families and moms who will say, well, I can just close my eyes. But closing your eyes can very quickly go from my eyes are closed to I'm clenching my eyes closed, and now I'm clenching my whole body to keep my eyes closed. And if you're having to work to keep your eyes closed, you're tensing up your whole entire body. You're completely defeating the purpose. And the eye mask allows you to essentially have your portable cave. It's portable darkness. And you want to look for one that doesn't touch your eyelashes or irritate your face at all. Something really lightweight like the 40 blinks. And I've seen other brands coming out more recently with the same idea where it doesn't touch the eyelashes. It creates like a complete seal. So it's not like the cutie little eye mask that came in that lingerie set. Those are just for fun. This is a serious sleep eye mask. And I'll tell you what usually ends up happening is when they come home from the hospital, partner is stealing the eye mask because I don't know if you guys know this, but babies don't sleep at night when you first bring them home. So partner ends up stealing the eye mask because babies sleep during the day, and then now we need to order another pair and a whole thing. So we spend a whole first class of hypnobirthing selling our families on this eye mask because, it, like Kara said, it shaves hours off your labor. You don't care about anything that's happening in front of you. You don't care what time of day it is. You don't care about your partner's crazy driving in the car. You don't care about any of it because it's none of your business. And it allows you to have that feeling of privacy, that feeling of darkness. Goal of all of these, what ultimately it comes down to being a mammal, is that need to feel unobserved when you're giving birth. And can we take every single person out of the room? Even free birthers usually have a partner or somebody there with them. Like somebody is usually observing us as humans giving birth, whether that's partners, midwives, assistants, family members, doctors, nurses, whatever. But we can feel unobserved. If we can control the lighting, if we can wear an eye mask, if we can labor at home as long as possible, that's what really all of these things are trying to do, is to serve that need, that mammalian need to feel unobserved when we're giving birth.
Those 40 blinks work so well to support all 5 aspects because you are literally inward. You are using your mammalian brain. You don't know if someone's staring at you. You don't know anything. You are now completely your own world, which works so well for labor, right? And even with an epidural, I've had moms who are like, no, I had my 40 blinks on. I was talking to the baby. I had it really quiet in the room. Because you're going to move forward better if you can mimic that environment. And if things have slowed down because of the epidural and they're using PIT or whatever, and you're feeling like, I just feel like this is out of control, the way you get back in touch as best as you can with the process is to mimic the process. So kind of taking yourself out of the environment that's clearly not working for your body, right? And those 40 blinks, I'm telling you, we should really be making money off of those things right now.
I know, truly. I mean, yeah, I've literally had moms not take them off till the baby hits their chest, and I have to say, okay, take your mask off, look at your baby. Like, your baby's out, but they're just so in the zone.
Yep.
And it really does make that transition from home to hospital so much better because they had them on at home, they have them on at the hospital. Does it even really matter that we changed venues? No, because they're in their cave. And they're good.
I will tell you, when you're trying to govern the drive to the hospital and your partner has now taken the wrong exit, you are immediately filled with catecholamine stress hormones and you are super pissed, and you could have avoided all of that with just having the 40 blinks on because you're in labor, you're not paying attention. You might hear, oh shit, but you don't know that that's because he missed the exit. He's going to turn around and get you to where you need to go, but it softens what's happening because you're still in your labor zone. I can't even tell you. It's essential. And if you don't like the procedures of needles coming towards you and all that, you got your 40 blinks on.
Yes.
Makes a huge difference.
Exactly. I completely forgot. Yeah, the IV, all of that stuff, the hospital-y stuff, right? The stuff that makes us go, when we think about giving birth in a hospital. What if you don't have to see any of it, right? I have moms wear the blinks for their cesareans when they get their spinals, when we're in the operating room the whole time until the baby cries. Or they say, okay, I'll show you, through the window, here's your baby. Then they take the eye mask off and look at their baby. But it makes the whole cesarean process so much less stressful. And that's why I say, like, these 5 elements, these tools, they're for every type of birth. It's the day you meet your baby. And so we're trying to make it as calm, as family-centered, as gentle to your body, your spirit as possible, and to your baby's body and spirit as possible. And by implementing these things and creating this environment, it's just the best case scenario for everybody. And yeah, the blinks are kind of magical. So this whole episode was basically to tell you guys wear an eye mask.
Yeah, exactly. This is the whole episode. Well, and we have a handout that we give that lists the 5 elements. It also talks about hydration and rest. They are printed actually I have it on my wall. Let me just pull it off. That we want everyone to have as their screensaver, right? Obviously, big letters. This is what I need to look at as a doula. If you have that in the forefront of your mind, whether you've met this person never or you really know them, you're constantly scanning the environment to be like, ooh, too bright. Oh, there's this. Oh, my word, too cold. Whatever it is, it's a constant thing. Partners, especially men, want a list. They want to know what to do. I'm like, here are your 5 things. And if her mom is there or your sister's there or whoever, here is their list of 5 things. Scan that environment. Keep her in these zones. It changes everything. And start asking the questions before labor begins. Let's start at the top. Like, what kind of music makes you feel safe? Let's go there. If you don't want any music, what is that going to look like? Start getting details as the support team, as the doula, as whoever, mom, grandma, whoever is being invited. How can I support this? Because sometimes I don't want chatter. It's not that I don't love you, mom. I just need it quiet. And if I say, shh, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Can you just respect that? But conversations have to happen before. Like it will avoid a lot of, conflict if that is a sticking point for everybody. Because sometimes, I want you to also think about this, when you have people that have not observed birth or don't want to see you in pain or any kind of discomfort, things happen. They get nervous. They either get chatty, they get fidgety, they have to do jobs, they're making noise, they're clanking dishes. That kind of stuff can also ruin your environment because they're trying to get the energy out of themselves, right? And that energy holds you back. So conversations like that need to take place. And sometimes I really want my mom there. Maybe she can just come at push time. Right? Because you're not going to push for 5 minutes if it's your first baby. You're probably going to push a little bit longer than that. Maybe that's the time. Hey, I'm 10 centimeters. Can you head over to the hospital?
Yeah. And when it comes to music, I want you to be thinking practically. So I love earbuds for the car, and that's about it. AirPods, earbuds are great for the car ride because I like to contribute to that portable cave situation. But in the hospital or the birth center, or even if you're moving around your home environment, you're getting on the bed, you're going to the bathroom, you're in the shower, you're all these things. If you're worried about these things staying in your ears, it's taking you out of it. A Bluetooth speaker, I always say it's like Ashley's number one extraneous item that I insist everybody puts in their hospital bag. So no matter where you are in the room, you can hear your music. And this is for partners. If you're a cheapskate and you don't pay for Spotify Premium, partners, you're going to at least opt for the free trial the last month of the pregnancy. Because if she hears a commercial for, I don't know, what are the big commercials right now? HelloFresh, for BetterHelp, a car dealership, somebody's going to take a Bluetooth speaker to the side of the head. Because, again, we want the sounds in the room to be ones that are only what they want to hear. And so if we are allowing ads to come in and disrupt this music that she's so carefully cultivated, we're completely disrupting that auditory environment that we're trying to create.
You also have to understand that Pandora is not going to always work at the hospital because everybody is on their phones at the hospital, and sometimes that broadband is not working. So the downloaded playlist is essential.
100%. That's the other part of any type of premium services. You're going to be able to download your playlist, make it longer than you think it needs to be, because you might wrap around to the beginning of the playlist a couple times during your labor. And it's also not a bad idea to have some mellower music and some more upbeat music so that you can have that more energetic music if it's like time to push, or if we've gotten really sleepy and we need to find our energy again. Not a terrible idea. So, when it comes to music, we want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible and that it is, like I said, cultivated by, it's a driver picks the music situation, right? It's the person having the baby is the driver. Everybody else just shuts up and listens whether they like it or not, period. End of conversation, because earbuds just are not practical for labor at all.
Well, and unless you have the kind that is like the headband that goes on that holds them, that has that works really well for some people. But if you're getting in and out of the water, not so good. So things are going to fluctuate for you. So if you have your affirmations or the rainbow relaxation or your Hypnobaby soundtracks or whatever you have practiced, it's okay to turn them off. You're going with your body and the moment with what's happening. What kind of questions are we asking for safety? I'm not going to feel safe if your mom's there grilling me with questions. I'm not going to feel safe if so-and-so doctor shows up because that's the one person in the practice I don't like. What kind of questions are we asking?
Yeah, and we need to be thinking ahead of time about if there are certain things that take place that are not optimal for us feeling safe, like that one midwife that we don't love. How are we going to work around that? Right? Are we going to ask for somebody different to come in and deliver the baby? Are we going to put our blinks on, put our music on, and pretend she's not in the room? Right? We need to come up with strategies for navigating these things. What if I'm planning a home birth because I don't like hospitals, and then my baby says, guess what, Mom, we're transferring. We need to go. How am I going to make sure that I feel safe walking in to those doors as safe as I possibly can, right? It involves having a really thorough birth plan. It involves having some of my stuff from home that makes me feel safe, my blinks, my music, all those things that make me feel really safe and make it feel as home-like as possible. But these are strategies that we need to be discussing ahead of time.
One thing that is not discussed a lot, and I have found this so much with my home birth families, is if they transfer, they assume their midwife is going to be there. Like, she will be there and she will govern everything and I won't have to worry about the staff because my midwife will be there. Sometimes midwives do not accompany you to the hospital. It's not a safe place for them to be because the doctors in them are combative. It's not that the midwife wants that, but sometimes they're not welcome there, right? So sometimes they come in as the guise of a doula. And other times they're going to be on the phone or on FaceTime and your actual doula will be there. If there are COVID restrictions or something like that, then they're having to decide, okay, do you want the midwife? Do you want the doula? Because we can only have a partner and somebody else. So please
sometimes
have those
only the partner. Sometimes everyone else on your team, you planned a home birth because of COVID restrictions and now you can't have your doula or your midwife, right? So, and of course a pandemic's not something that anybody could have planned for, but it's about knowing what the rules are at your facility and figuring out with your birth team, okay, if we transfer, who's it going to be? What's going to happen, right?
Such important conversations, because I think we just assume, well, I hired my midwife, I paid her all this money, she'll be there. Sometimes that's not the case. So please talk about that ahead of time. What happens if your partner's sick and can't come? What happens if your doula's sick? Are you comfortable with the backup? I am always like, I'm a type A planner. I know 25 different scenarios ahead of time. And then if I go with the flow, great. At least I've done my due diligence ahead of time, because that's probably one of the biggest regrets of families is like, I just didn't know to do that. Just ask. We're really talking about your safety, the privacy, like all of these elements. What are going to be your number one points for that? And privacy, same thing. If for some reason you're at the hospital and you're pushing and they might need a baby team to come in, a pediatric team to just check on the baby, did you know that they can be behind the curtain? You can just see their feet. They need to be in the room, yes, for safety reasons, but they don't have to watch you birth. So there are things to know ahead of time, like, yeah, the peds team's coming in, I want them behind the curtain. Your partner can say that because you've already talked about it. It's on your birth plan. If for some reason there's extra staff that is needed at the time of my birth, I request that they be behind the curtain until absolutely necessary. Like, no one has to see your vagina if you don't want everybody there. Those kind of conversations need to happen ahead of time.
And there's another piece of safety that I wanted to mention that a lot of us don't realize or don't really think about. But if you have certain types of touch that don't make you feel safe, places on your body that you don't like to be touched, certain types of language that doesn't make you feel safe, like having someone tell you to calm down, right? Or any other sort of phrases that trigger you in that way, type of touch that makes you not feel safe. It's really important that you communicate that to your partner, to your doula, to your nurse, your nurses that work with you, your midwives. In order for us to help you feel as safe as possible, we need to know what you are and are not okay with. And so you don't have to qualify it. You don't need to give us an in-depth story of the traumatic event that occurred that is why you don't like having this part of your body touched. You do not have to qualify it. You do not have to tell us why. Your partner probably knows. But for doulas and nurses and midwives, all we need to know is what type of touch makes you feel safe and what type of touch is okay, what's not okay. This is your birth. It's your body and your baby. And you can be as specific about your needs as you want to be, because that's how you feel the safest. That's how you create the environment that is the best for you to welcome your baby. With the privacy element, obviously, you'll hear us say it over and over and over again. When we say stay home as long as possible, we mean it, guys. Stay home as long as you possibly can. And I feel like I hear families say that. We're going to stay home as long as we can. And then as a doula, they're like, should we go? Should we go? Should we go? Should we go? And I'm like, guys, like, your labor just started. Go the fuck to sleep. Go to bed. It's that we get so amped on, oh my God, I'm in labor. And then we want to call the doula over. The doula needs to come. When you're in so much labor, you don't even notice that she walked in the door. And you need to go to the hospital when you're making cow noises and you don't even realize that we just made the drive to the hospital because you're so much in your labor.
And Dr. Cap likes to say, when you see hair that's not yours, that's a great time to get in the car, right? Obviously, he doesn't mean that like that as literal,
yes.
But it's early labor, you guys, is boring. That's when so much of the majority of your labor is taking place, like physical changes. You should be ignoring it as long as possible, sleeping through it, eating, like amping up for the calorie intake that you're going to need for the latter part of labor before things start to shut down and you can't digest well. Early labor is boring. There's a reason that we do not film and have sitcoms and TV shows about birth, because for the first, 30 episodes of a half an hour each, you would be just watching a woman walk back and forth. Like there's nothing to watch. It is so boring. And
you'd be watching a woman sit on her ball eating snacks, watching Netflix in between contractions.
Like what a waste of your half an hour, right? You're like, Netflix is not going to produce that. So understanding what really goes on in early labor will help you stay home longer. And the practice that you're going to hear in different birth stories of, I practiced relaxation every night. I practiced bouncing on my ball. I was visualizing staying calm. I saw myself in a very relaxed form as the surge came up, my whole body was loose. Like, practice that and stay home, because you're right. We run way too quick. And then we're 3 centimeters. Well, I don't want to drive again. So we'll just stay here. And that lengthens everything.
Mm-hmm. If they'll even admit you, right? Like so many hospitals have thresholds that they're not going to admit you until this point, and people don't even realize that. And then they're like, they turned me away and I have to do the car ride again. And can you see how this is all disrupting that need to feel unobserved, that feeling of safety, all of those things. So, and then the other thing with privacy, I kind of already alluded to it, is that, doulas, as amazing as we are interventions. We are interventions and we are observers. And so if you are in the hospital for the majority of your labor, let's say you're having an induction, as a doula, I'm not there the whole time in the early part of the induction, because you don't need me sitting there like, how's it going? What's going on? How you feeling? Because I'm observing you. I'm invading your privacy. If you're at home laboring, I have a certain threshold of intensity of labor and timing that I'm looking for before I'll even hint at inviting myself into the space. And usually I won't even invite myself. I wait until they say, we're ready for you, because I know that I'm an intervention. I know that I'm an observer. And so privacy is not just about the hospital staff. It's about, also, the whole thing with notifying the family. When the text messages are going to start, wait until as long as you can before you let family members know you're in labor, because otherwise it's ping, 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 ping. When are we coming over? Da, 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 da. And that's invading your privacy. So you want to know ahead of time, what's the game plan with the doula? What's the game plan with notifying family? What's the game plan for staying home? So that we can make sure we're really implementing these techniques to make this as private an experience as we possibly can.
And warmth, it's the same thing. I kind of focus on sensations. I've had moms where they're going into an induction. It's not their ideal, but they've got pups. They're itchy. There's things they have to do that they didn't want to do. So what's going to make you feel like you're cozy and you're in a womb environment? So they'll bring their fuzzy, warm robe, because if that room is cold or hot, they can throw it around them and really tie it up, or they can just put it on their shoulders if they need to. They wear fuzzy slippers because it feels good on their feet. Think of sensations of comfort. What will make you feel safe in whatever environment you're in that brings the warmth or the cool or the kind of taking that protection mode into temperature and safety so that she can release. That's the whole point. So start thinking about sensations, what kind of touch I like, or if I don't like touch, how am I protecting that environment? The silky, either silky robes or those warm, fuzzy ones, where they're thick and dense, it's like that luxurious thing, like I'm going to treat myself to. I had one mom who said, I can't afford it, but I borrowed my mom's. And it's the most amazing robe ever because she doesn't spare any expense on things she buys for herself. So what kinds of things can you guys talk about ahead of time that will create that warmth and sense of safety for her?
I've even had families, especially those going in for what they know is going to be a long haul, like induction or whatever, bring their own pillows and blankets to the hospital. Pictures of your family members or your pets. I've had moms put art on the wall that made them feel good. Affirmation cards up on the wall, twinkle lights, that it's not necessarily physical warmth, but it's the warming of the environment that makes it feel more home-like, that makes it feel more cave-like, that shows them things that release those endorphins for them. And pillows and stuff that smell like home are going to contribute to that as well. And you're going to be more comfortable if you're trying to rest, especially for a long induction. So if it's going to make you feel more comfortable, if it's going to contribute to that warm, cozy, comfortable feeling, bring it with you. Like, honestly, whatever's going to make you feel better.
I had one mom laugh. She said, I had my 40 blinks on the whole time, but my husband had put my affirmation cards up. My dog's picture was by my bed. I had my robe on the side. She goes, once that baby was out and I took my 40 blinks off, I was like, I had twinkle lights around me, like it was magical. And she said, so that's what the nurses saw. And that's probably why they were so quiet and so calm for me, because he made this place amazing. She goes, he'd even draped the nurses' light so that it was dark for me. And she goes, I never saw one thing until after the baby came.
I was just naked with my blinks on.
I was naked with my blinks on. Yeah. And I thought, that's so sweet. So we going back into darkness. What kinds of things can you do to dampen that environment? It is bright outside those hospital rooms. Pull the shades down, right? If you need it, lift it up. If you need to kind of say, oh my gosh, it's actually 6 a.m. now, it is a daytime, whether you're at home, whether you're in the car, whether you're at the hospital, how's that light, which can affect labor going forward or stalling? What can you do? What are the things that are going to work for that birthing person?
Yeah, and if they're not a blink person, if they're not an eye mask person, turning the lights down. Usually, I feel like most hospitals now have like sort of different lights you can control, and so they can have a little spotlight over the nurses' station so the nurses can see what they're doing. Or I even have nurses sort of turn the monitor away to do their work, and so the rest of the room can be dark. The bathroom's super dark and quiet and private. Again, people are like, ooh, bathrooms, but it is the quietest, darkest, probably the cleanest part of the actual hospital room. But if you're not a blink person, twinkle lights are awesome. LED candles are great. Those little diffusers, essential oil diffusers that have lights in them that change color, create the ambiance that feels safe to you, the level of darkness that feels safe to you. And for some people, it's an all lights on kind of thing, and that's right for them. But for most people, some level of controlling those lights is really important. And even if you don't love a 40 blinks or an eye mask for the birth or the room, use it for those hallways and those lobbies that you're walking through to get to your hospital room. Because not only are the lights bright, but everybody's looking at you, making your cow noises in the hallway. And that way you don't have to worry about their stupid faces as you're trying to stay in the zone.
Well, and one of the things new doulas ask a lot as we're going through classes and stuff is, what do I cover in prenatal visits? Like, there's so many things, and I don't know what I'm supposed to cover, and do I cover childbirth education, whatever. These 5 elements are a really good place to start. You know, how can we explain the environment to them and why we're worried about the environment? And then let's craft all of our backup plans for it. If we stay home long, here's what we're going to do. If we get transferred in early because our water breaks or something's going on with the baby and we're going to be in the hospital earlier, then what are we going to do? And if this shifts into a cesarean, what are we going to do? All these 5 elements you can craft ahead of time so you've got all your bases covered. That makes everybody feel more prepared in an environment where you can't control anything, right? But if you've already made backup plans with something that's so simple as just supporting the person, it makes a huge difference in labor. It's an easy thing to cover as a doula, especially when you're new or don't know what to say yet.
Exactly. I feel like we've really hammered it home that you need to be thinking about what you're going to do to support your inner mammal when it comes to giving birth. And I think a lot of us think about, is it going to be an epidural? Is it going to be an induction? Is it all that? But we're not thinking about what does my body and mind actually need to go through this process.
And it's hydration, it's rest, and it's these 5 elements. If you can keep the birthing body in a good state, you're going to do okay. But the emotional and the mental state is just as important. The 5 elements help govern that. So thank you to Michel Odent, because I cannot take any credit for that. It just worked into our curriculum because as we put it into play and we've refined it over the years in whatever way it works for that family, it just works.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you really put thought and consideration into making sure your needs are met, how it changes how you experience birth. And like I said, it doesn't really matter what type of birth you're planning. If you can put these things into practice, it's going to be a positive experience for you, your baby, your partner, because it's what we need, because we're mammals.
And we're going to leave it right there, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to BirthEducationCenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.